Philosophy to me is one of the most interesting topics to discuss, study, think about, immerse yourself into. I've always liked it ever since I discovered it. Like ever since I realized you could think more thoughts. Like I don't know, I had this I guess traumatic experience you could say. It's kind of ignorant on my end, but when I was in preschool, I went to a field trip at a supermarket, and we were in a van, right? And like every time you get a field trip, a certain person gets to sit in the passenger seat. Very young age. I don't know how safe or legal that was, but I was super excited to be the kid to be in the passenger seat. And this was my turn when we're going to fucking Walmart or Publix. And so we go. But there's a rule when we get to wherever we're going, and it's you don't get out of the seat until someone taps your head. And at that very young age, I was very obedient. So not being tapped on the head, I never got out of my seat. Well, they all got out of theirs and left. And so I just sat in this van, and I'm not sure how long I just sat in this van, but what I do recall from that experience was like I was sitting in the seat and I was looking up at like the top right corner of the windshield, and I just remember having a thought that was bigger than I ever had before, and I was like, whoa. And they kind of like opened me up to not like a landscape, but I don't know. I feel like it's in like Dali's painting sometimes, but where it's just like a grid floor. It seems like it's just a never-ending. Damn, I wish I was better at explaining this, but it's like when I looked up in the corner of the windshield, it's like I understood thought had no bounds, and obviously I was in preschool, so my thoughts weren't so grandiose, but I just started to develop it from there, and I just enjoy learning so much. I don't think it's a personally specific trait. I feel like if people were exposed to learning in the correct environment and delivered, and the material was delivered properly, I think nearly everybody would be receptive to gaining more knowledge about this experience that we're all in and the environment, and just more knowledge. However, I will say, like, there's a saying, knowledge is power. Well, there's also these things that they say, I think it's this Greek mythology story of Narcissus, but it's basically his prophecy is that too much self-knowledge would lead to his own death. And I think there is, in the same, I'm not good at filling in the blanks today. In the same, field there, Jordan Peterson talks about how if you stare too long into the abyss will stare back into you. And I think it's kind of that. There's this balance that you have to have. If you want to go to the deep end, you can, but you got to swim back. You can't really just stay out there too long. But anyways, philosophy is a great tool, I think, to develop socially. I think you can have conversations that are more, they have more depth to them. I think people are, it's interesting, people like to have deep conversations, even though, like, it's not that deep, and like, people have carefree aspects to them sometimes. It is more often than not, people are fulfilled by a conversation where there's actual substance involved and it's not just a surface level thing. And so philosophy seemed to me the way to dig the deepest I could into this experience. And so Plato was a really interesting guy to me. I don't know why, it just seems like it's a name that you constantly hear when philosophy is brought up. And as ignorant and tragic as it is for me to say, I really don't know much about the guy. Off the top, I can't really recall as much as I would like of his life and like what he contributed. But this book I got it at a thrift store, which is crazy. If you want to find textbooks, if you want to find books about anything, Goodwills are basically a library. I spent last Saturday with my buddy Keegan, he's my fucking roommate now, but we fucking were sitting down and the Goodwill just flipping through books. It's a lot. It was like Barnes and Nobles, but guess what? The books are 90 cents, and like textbooks. Like this is from I think Vanderbilt University, and yeah, yeah. Seventh edition Vanderbilt University. Bought it for a couple dollars. And it has so much information in it. You can't beat it. So if you're interested in studying certain topics, I'm certain you can find whatever topic you're interested in a Goodwill and a fairly reputable source that it's written by. But this basically I just wanted to start. That was kind of a tangent, but Plato the foundation of his theory, basically. So it's I'll just start. The theory of knowledge, the foundation of Plato's philosophy, is his account of knowledge. The sophists, we have seen, had skeptical views regarding our ability to acquire knowledge. Human knowledge, they believed, was grounded in social customs and the perceptions of individual people. Such knowledge fluctuated from one culture or person to another. Plato, though, staunchly rejected this view. He was convinced that there are unchanging and universal truths which human reason is capable of grasping. In his dialogue, The Republic, he picturesquely makes his case with the allegory of the cave and the metaphor of the divided line. Now, earlier when I said I couldn't really speak too much on Plato, those are the two things I would have spoken on, is the cave and the Republic, and I wish I had more information. But I love the part where he says that he was convinced that there are unchanging and universal truths, because I do believe that. I think there has to be some order to the chaos. There has to be order for the chaos to occur within, I feel. I don't think chaos can just be without any borders, you know. So now we'll go into the cave. Plato asks us to imagine some people living in a large cave in which from childhood they have been chained by their legs and necks so that they cannot move. That's nice. Because they cannot even turn their heads. They can only see what is in front of them. Behind them is an elevation that rises abruptly from the level where they are shackled. On this elevation there are other persons walking back and forth carrying artificial objects, including the figures of animals and human beings made out of wood, stone, and other various materials. Behind these walking persons is a fire, and further back still is the entrance to the cave. The chained prisoners can look only forward toward the wall at the back of the cave. They can see neither each other nor the moving persons nor the fire behind them. All they can ever see are the shadows on the wall in front of them, which are projected as people walk in front of the fire. They never see the objects or the people carrying them, nor are they aware that the shadows are shadows of other things. When they see a shadow and hear someone's voice echo in the cave, they assume that the sound is coming from the shadow, since they are not aware of the existence of anything else. The prisoners, then, recognize as reality only the shadows formed on the wall. And this can be kind of exemplified in nature. If you like YouTube ants and kind of just, it's a certain term, I don't know what it is, but basically if you drop an ant on the table, draw a black line with a Sharpie around it or maybe some certain material, the ant thinks that it can't go through that circle even though there's no difference in elevation. It's just, it's still flat, but it notices that there's this barrier there so it can't go through it. But so that's its reality, right? But if it breaks through it somehow, you know, say whatever mishap occurs and it breaks through that barrier, then it goes, whoa, the thing I just thought I couldn't go through, I got through. And then it never again gets stuck by just seeing that little bar because it knows it's not an actual reality. It's just an illusion to it, right? Same thing within the circus. Like I don't know if that's still an active thing with elephants, but driving the stake in the ground when they're a baby, and when they're a baby they can't pull the stake out of the ground, so they grow up to be older, and even though they're old and strong enough to pull that stake out, they still believe, because they know from back in their earlier years they weren't able to, so they still think that they're not able to. Same thing I think with gnats. Gnats jump in jars. If you put them in fucking jars, they jump X amount of inches or whatever the fuck. If you take them out, they jump even higher. It's like, it's bound to the perception of what their limit is, and it's only their perception that is limiting them. Without the perception, there would be no limit. What would happen, asks Plato, if one of these prisoners were released from his chains and were forced to stand up, turn around, and walk with eyes lifted up toward the light of the fire? All of his movements would be exceedingly painful. Suppose he was forced to look at the objects being carried and the shadows of which he had become accustomed to seeing on the wall. Would he not find these actual objects less pleasing to his eyes and less meaningful than the shadows? And would not his And would not his eyes ache if he looked straight at the light from the fire itself? At this point, he would undoubtedly try to escape from his liberator and turn back to the things he could see with clarity, being convinced that the shadows were clearer than the objects he was forced to look at in the firelight. I don't know if that can be drawn into Stockholm Syndrome, but yeah, it's the familiarity of the environment and reality that you're in. Even if what you're living in is made up, make believe, facade, fugazi, it's home to you still, and anything different than that is alienated, I guess, in your brain, and it's a foreign entity. You don't know what it is, and you're not used to it, so you want to go back to how it was, which is kind of just fucking crazy, right? There's a saying or a story. Yeah, fuck. This is one of my favorite stories. I heard this shit when I was like 13, and I will never forget it. I'll never forget it. So, there's a prisoner of war, and captain or general, whoever the fuck rank goes to that guy, says, so, tomorrow morning you can either die by a firing squad, or you can walk through this door where unknown horror awaits you. He has the night to decide. He wakes up the next day, and he chooses to die by the firing squad. After the firing squad, makes him into cheddar cheese, one of the soldiers comes to the general and says, "Hey, what was behind the door?" And the general said, "Freedom." And the moral of that story is people are more willing to accept a circumstance that they're sure of the outcome rather than one unknown. And I think that's one of the biggest drawbacks of our species, if that's not too grandiose of a statement for me to make, but it's like the unknown isn't that scary. Once you know, it's just, I could say that better, but the story says it, I think, enough. Unknown horror. It's funny to identify freedom with that definition, because it is. It's like beauty, it's tragedy, it's happiness, sadness. It's everything bundled up in one. That's like Pandora's box. I'm sorry to just be connecting all this shit to random stuff, but Pandora's box. I don't know. It might have been this book I was reading it in, but it was talking about either a rendition of it, a version of it, I don't know, or if it's the original version. But basically, it was Zeus was fucking fed up with us, right? Didn't want us here no more. I think, at least he was fed up with us. If he wanted us here or not, I think he wanted to enslave us, but maybe I'm wrong on that too. I knew he wasn't happy with us. That's all I know. So, Pandora's box is opened, right? Like, I believe Pandora's convinced to open the box and things like that, and everything flies out. Famine, war, all these things, negative, and the only thing left when the box is sealed is hope. Well, I, growing up, hearing that story, always assumed that hope being left in the box was like a silver lining, Oh, we still have hope. Like, we have something to hold on to get us through all that shit, right? That is going to be, it's going to be okay, right? Then I heard that the story is basically Zeus played a joke on us by leaving hope in the box, because human beings will endure any amount of pain or suffering with this illusion in their mind that something good will come out of it, or that they are doing it for a purpose that is rewarding in the end. So, Sisyphus, if that's the pronunciation, pushing the rock up the hill, like, just to push it up again. It's a never-ending experience of strife, and Zeus thought it was a joke. Um, and I think I have personally have to be careful with that, just in things that I like, because I dive in, absolutely. Um, Greek mythology is really interesting, because then you dive right in, and then you start, at least I start thinking about Icarus and just flying too high, close to the sun, burn your wings, falling to the ground. It's like it's so many things where you can just relate it to your life and see how, yeah, I'm not obviously gonna fucking fly to the sun and burn and fall to the ground, but it's like I could expand myself or my activities to an extent that's unsustainable. It's like you need to understand how to interpret it into daily life rather than just some folklore. Because I think that's what these tools were. They were not folklore. They were tools. It was information. That's how I think information was passed through time and through civilizations, when there wasn't ways of recording it as officially as maybe we do now, even though maybe it's not that official still. I don't know who the hell's right and what's going on. So now, suppose this. Suppose this prisoner cannot turn back, but was instead dragged forcibly up the steep and rough passage to the mouth of the cave, and released only after he had been brought out into the sunlight. The impact of the radiance of the sun upon his eyes would be so painful that he would be unable to see any of the things that he was now told were real. It would take some time before his eyes became accustomed to the world outside the cave. He would first recognize some shadows and would feel at home with them. If it was the shadow of a person, he would have seen the shape before as it appeared on the wall of the cave. Next, he would see the reflections of people and things in the water, and this would represent a major advance in his knowledge. For what he once knew only as a solid dark blur would now be seen in more precise detail of line and color. A flower makes a shadow that gives very little, if any, indication of what the flower really looks like, but its image as reflected in the water provides our eyes with a clearer vision of each petal and its various colors. In time he would I apologize. In time, he would see the flower itself. As he lifted his eyes skyward, he would find it easier at first to look at the heavenly bodies at night, gazing at the moon and the stars instead of at the sun in daytime. Finally, he would look right at the sun in its natural positions in the sky, and not at its reflection from or through anything else. I don't know what the fuck that means. Like, I'm trying to think. It seems like he likes it, right? I guess. Like, he looks skyward. Finally, he would look right at the sun in its natural positions in the sky, like he's not, like, upset about it. But its image as reflected in the water provides our eyes with a clearer vision of each petal. And you know what's funny? I was holding a mirror, I just moved, and I was holding a mirror, like, um, I don't know, like a serving tray, I guess, like a rectangular serving tray, and it was like showing the trees in the sky above me, and it was clearer than any HD, 3D, 5K, 4D, 1080p TV or like glasses I've ever seen. I don't understand how it was as clear as it was. And I don't know if that's what it's trying to say. For what he once knew would represent a major advance in his knowledge. For what he once knew would represent a major advance in his knowledge. For he once knew only as a solid dark blur would now be seen in more precise detail of line and color. A flower makes a shadow. Yeah, I guess it's just him kind of like seeing the beauty and all the intricacies of nature. Because if you look at a flower and like its petals and things like that, like you could kind of just get lost in it. because you're not just thinking about the pedal, and you're not just looking at the pedal either. You're looking at it, all of it, all at once. The movie, everything, everywhere, all at once, or something like that, was a pretty cool movie. That was a little off topic. And so, this extraordinary experience would gradually lead this liberated prisoner to conclude that the sun is what makes things visible. It is the sun, too, that accounts for the seasons of the year, and for that reason the sun is the cause of life in the spring. Now he would understand what he and his fellow prisoners saw on the wall, how shadows and reflections differ from things as they really are in the visible world, and how without the sun there would be no visible world. How would such a person feel about his previous life in the cave? He would recall what he and his fellow prisoners there took to be wisdom. He would recall how they gave prizes to the one who had the sharpest eye for the passing shadows and the best memory for the order in which they followed each other. Would the released prisoner still think such prizes were worth having? Fuck no. And would he envy, Plato didn't say that, I did. And would he envy the people who received honors in the cave? Instead of envy, he would have only sorrow and pity for them. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a thing, that's a common occurrence with anybody that you kind of see that might have some sort of, you know, I don't know if disability is the right term, but, you know, something along those lines. You do feel some sort of, I don't know, just, yeah, it's weird, an innate guilt. I don't know if it's really fair, but it's like you just kind of notice that you can do fucking a lot more things. And the craziest thing is most people don't even take advantage of those things that they're able to do with the gifts that they're given. You know, that's, I like that one saying where it's like the richest place in the world is the graveyard, because there's just so many things that just weren't done. And like that's my greatest fear. I feel like it's just like I want to be broke as fuck in that in that coffin. Not financially, so I guess, but you know what I mean. If he went back to his former seat in the cave, I don't think he ever would, but if he went back to his former seat in the cave, he would at first have great difficulty, for going suddenly from daylight into the cave would fill his eyes with darkness. He could not, under these circumstances, compete very efficiently with the other prisoners in making out the shadows on the wall. Shit. While his cave vision was still dim and unsteady, those who had their permanent residence in the darkness could win every round of competition with him. They would at first find the situation very amusing and would taunt him by saying that his sight was perfectly all right before he went up out of the cave, but that now his sight was ruined. Their conclusion would be that it is not worth trying to go up out of the cave. Indeed, Plato says, if they could grab hold of the person who was trying to set them free and lead them up, they would kill him. That gives me Lord of the Flies vibes. I don't know why, but this allegory suggests that most of us dwell in the darkness of the cave. That we have oriented, I'll reread that just because there shouldn't have been that pause, but it's just like that hit. This allegory suggests that most of us dwell in the darkness of the cave, that we have oriented our thoughts around the blurred world. I want to redo that. This is beautiful. This allegory suggests that most of us dwell in the darkness of the cave, that we have oriented our thoughts around the blurred world of shadows. It is the function of education to lead people out of the cave into the world of light. Education is not simply a matter of putting knowledge into a person's soul that does not possess it, any more than vision involves putting sight into blind eyes. Knowledge is like vision in that it requires an organ capable of receiving it. The prisoner had to turn his whole body around so that his eyes could see the light instead of the darkness. Similarly, it is necessary for us to turn completely away from the deceptive world of change and appetite that causes a kind of intellectual blindness. Education, then, is a matter of conversion, a complete turning around from the world of appearance to the world of reality. The conversion of the soul, says Plato, is not to put the power of sight in the soul's eye, which already has it, but to ensure that instead of looking in the wrong direction, it is turned the way it ought to be. But looking in the right direction does not come easily. Even the noblest natures do not always want to look that way, and so upward from darkness to light. Similarly, when those who have been liberated from the cave achieve the highest knowledge, they must not be allowed to remain in the higher world of contemplation. Instead, they return to the cave and take part in the life and labors of the prisoners. What I'm feeling from that right now, I'm just feeling this thing from this movie called My Dinner with Andre. If you've never seen it, you should check it out. It's got the guy from Princess Bride who drinks the poison, says like you should never have a land war in Asia. It's a good movie. Princess Bride and My Dinner with Andre. My Dinner with Andre is the one I'm talking about, because the guy Andre is talking. It's basically the whole movie's a dinner they're having, and they're both actors. One's living in New York City, and the other like traveled around to, I think it was mainly Africa, but it was like maybe multiple countries he traveled to. But he just experienced the world, and then the other actor stayed in New York City trying to make it right. Well, there's a popular scene that you probably have seen on the internet of Andre explaining. Have you ever noticed people wanting to move out in New York City, but they never move out? And he like explains how basically they are living in a constant state of schizophrenia because they have built a prison themselves, but so by being the prisoners they're also the warden of the prison that they've built, so they are stuck in the own confinement that they've built for themselves. And it's very similar, I feel, to this, except I don't feel that it was the prisoner's fault that they were a prisoner and that was the only thing they were exposed to, but I do believe that it's our fault that it is our fault if we limit what we are exposed to. And you are. Like Billy Woods has this line where he says, my own warden, celly, superintendent, flaunt, flagrant, disassociation, dissident cadence, free the political, damn, I almost had it. But yeah, like we just confine ourselves mentally, physically, financially, like in every way possible. And it's kind of built that way, I think, to a degree, for like there to be traps set up fairly easy for people to fall into because they look enticing, right? They're tempting. Temptation is a big tactic for a lot of people to get a lot of things. That's why I think understanding people's intentions, certain intentions. I think people are very ignorant, naive, or blind, excuse me, to certain people's intentions when it's fairly blatant looking from the outside in. There's a beautiful story about a fisherman catching a mermaid, and the fisherman was so captivated by the beauty of the mermaid backtrack. Mermaids are not beautiful in Disney, right? Okay, mermaids killed people back in the day with the mythology shit. So the fisherman caught a mermaid, but was captivated by the beauty of the mermaid, so much so that he did not recognize the tail of the mermaid. That would eventually be the death of him, because she would whip it and kill him or slice him, however it would go. And so I feel that is exactly what we do in most situations. We hold on to, again, the Pandora's box with the hope. We hold on to that tiny little thing that we think will get us through it all, rather than just expanding ourselves and not needing these little things attached to us to make it. I think freedom has become a very has a distorted definition as of recent, and it probably always will, because I think it's very subjective to what it truly means. Because, like I said, I think there needs to be some order for the chaos to be occurring. But I could be wrong about that. I've been wrong about many things. So Plato rejected the skepticism of the sophists by arguing that there are these two worlds, the dark world of the cave and the bright world of light. For Plato, knowledge was not only possible but virtually infallible. What makes knowledge infallible is that it is based upon what is most real. The dramatic contrast between the shadows and reflections and the actual objects parallels the different degrees to which human beings could be enlightened. The sophists were skeptical about the possibility of true knowledge because they were impressed by the variety of change that we experience, which is relative to each person. Plato recognized that if we all could know where the shadow Plato recognized that if we could know where the shadows, then indeed we could never have reliable knowledge. Plato recognized that if all we could know were the shadows, then indeed we could have. That's a tough one. I don't know. Plato recognized that if all we could know were the shadows, then indeed we could never have reliable knowledge. Yes, that's true. Okay, I understand that now. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just that we would just be seeing projections of things and creating an image in our head of what it might be or could be and what we think it is. We wouldn't actually have our abilities to use our senses to really define what the object is and things like that. For these shadows would always change in size and shape depending on the, to us, unknown motions of the real objects. However, Plato was convinced that we could discover the real objects behind all the multitude of shadows and thereby attain true knowledge. That I believe in. I think there is not a secret to the universe, but I strongly believe that the things that we see, for instance, like with the Great Pyramid of Giza and things like that, just structures and innovation from time periods that doesn't seem plausible to an extent. I feel like there was just an understanding of a principle of the universe that shows itself everywhere, right? Like that's why I feel like when they do all these measurements of things and try to make all these connections, like they're like, oh well, we found like the circumference of the Earth and all this stuff in the diameter, whatever it is, and it's like, yeah, but like maybe they just understood like the first, part of the equation, and then that equation eventually would evolve into that thing, and then so that's what's being represented, but it's really what they understood was this very simplistic version at the very bottom, because I think all we've kind of done in the past couple of decades seems to be is complicate and use language where it's like a barrier to entry to even understand what's occurring in certain events. And I think if it was a more simpler approach where people really simpler and transparent, that's what in terms of transparency, there's a great documentary that you could look up. It's I think The War on Electricity, but it's basically following how, as you're aware, JP Morgan of JP Morgan Chase, so that guy was funding Thomas Edison alongside Nikola Tesla. And for whatever reason, the science or academia departments that are at B, that are whatever, there, kind of made Tesla look like some sort of fringe scientist when Marconi, I apologize for not knowing his first name, but I don't really give a fuck because he used 11 of Tesla's patents to send a transmission across the English Channel, which made JP Morgan completely negate all funding for Tesla's site in Wardenclyffe, Long Island, or the Wardenclyffe site in Long Island. I'm not sure if if the location was called Wardenclyffe. I know his site was called Wardenclyffe, and it was a tower where he was trying to produce atmospheric electricity, and Do your own research into that. He wouldn't be a fringe if he was a fringe scientist. The FBI and things like that, certain agencies would not have been researching him and following him until the day he died, making sure that he wasn't selling his inventions to Russians or communist enemies at that time. And another interesting fact is that he lived in the New York hotel towards the end of his life, and for whatever reason, the New York hotel has a electrical system that's set up to hold a certain amount of ampage and watts that the building itself would never, ever require. And so Tesla lived out his last few years in that hotel, and they believe that he was still experimenting with electricity at that time. But there's no real proof on that other than like seeing certain things of like instruments and from that era. But yeah, it's strange. J.P. Morgan was funding it, and then he was just interested in getting the stock prices, you know, and that's what basically changed things from being atmospherical energy based planet to informational transmissioned one, an informationally transmissioned one, however you'd say that. But and then they argue, well, you'd never be able to have a cell phone and all these other things, because I believe that the atmospheric energy would like short all these like circuit boards and you know, like power plants and things that we have in place now. But guess what, bitch? We probably would have developed some shit that would coincide with the new technology we had, because we're human beings and we're smart as fuck and creative as well. So it's like, I hate that answer. It's like, oh, well, we probably just wouldn't have been able to figure it out. Bitch, we're here now, and we figured out some stupid shit to get here. So it's like, I don't know why people think that way. But so anyways, also, I forgot to mention this, J.P. Morgan wasn't interested in Tesla's idea of electricity because it was atmospheric, meaning free to everyone, and that what Thomas Edison was developing was able to be metered, so you could charge people for it, which was right up J.P. Morgan's alley, right? It's a really interesting picture if you want to look it up. There's Tesla. It's a real picture. It's him in his lab sitting next to. So they did a test one time about basically Thomas Edison, I think, was using direct current, and then Tesla was using alternating current, and they were trying to prove how safe it was. Or Tesla, and Thomas Edison was saying it was safe. So he tried to prove it, ended up killing a fucking elephant. Tesla has a picture of him sitting in his laboratory around one of his coils where there's these lightning bolts shooting all around him that look like they would, like in those cartoons where it's just like your fucking skeleton showing, it would be like that. But he's just sitting there writing little fucking notes in his book. And then he has like documentation of how many amps or watts, I'm not sure what exactly the measurement was he was acquiring when he was doing these experiments, but like he was getting enough energy to produce energy, you know, outward to power things. And also there's a lot of things that are, I'm not going to say a lot of things, there are things that are saying that basically Tesla was very understanding. I guess he'd spent time in Egypt, and he was very understanding of the fact that the Pyramid of Giza was originally used as the center of a worldwide power grid back in a very ancient civilization that had capabilities that we don't currently possess. And it's also been found out that recently there's been published LiDAR scans showing that there are these, I think, 16 cylindrical columns beneath the Pyramid of Giza plateau that have these, what are they, circular pathways around them that they believe are some sort of conductive property, so that they think it is electrical meaning or mechanical of some sort. It's very interesting, I think, to think about stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, it's very clear that we chose as society to have a meter on things. You know, we didn't go the other route, and it's strange to me. But I think also sometimes, like, what if like they knew that route? didn't work out. Like something happened, you know? Like, cause yeah, if it's obtainable energy everywhere, like maybe it's just like not a good place to be because everybody has access to certain things. I don't know. Um, but I feel like human nature, in a sense, would kind of develop differently if everything was being shared at the very beginning of everything. You know, like if that's all you ever knew, things were shared, everything was everybody's, not in a socialist, communist way. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying if things were developed differently and energy and food and things like that were just in a natural aspect rather than an industrial complex that it is now. That's all. You know, home gardening, for instance, right? Not communism. I'm just saying, you have your own fucking garden, you got potatoes or some shit. I don't know. So now it's going on into the divided line. In his metaphor of the divided line, Plato provides more detail about the levels of knowledge that we can obtain. In the process of discovering true knowledge, we move through 4 stages of development. At each stage, there is a parallel between the kind of object presented to our minds and the kind of thought that the object makes possible. These objects and their parallel types of thought can be diagrammed as follows. I'll put this so you guys can see it. So that is close as fuck. That's the diagram it is showing. I cannot read it from this angle, but I'll read it in a second. So what the diagram is saying is on the left, right, on the y-axis, it's saying intelligible world up top, and then in the objects it says the good and forms. Underneath it says mathematical objects, and then to the side it says types of thought, intelligence, and thinking. And then visible world, things, images, belief, imagining. And then outside of that it says knowledge and opinion. So I guess belief and imagining are opinion, intelligence and thinking are knowledge, the good forms, and then mathematical objects are the intelligible world, and then things or images are the visible world. So, in the above, the line itself appears vertically at the center of the diagram, linking y and x. It is broken into 4 segments, each representing different types of thought. That the line is a continuous one, suggesting that there is some degree of knowledge at every point, but as the line passes through the lowest form of reality to the highest, there is a parallel progression from the lowest degree of truth to the highest. The line is divided, first of all, into 2 unequal parts. The upper, I didn't even notice that. The upper and larger part represents the intelligible world, and the smaller, lower part, the visible world. The upper and larger part represents the intelligible world, and the smaller, lower part, the visible. This unequal division symbolizes the lower degree of reality and truth found in the visible world as compared with the greater reality of truth in the intelligible world. So that makes sense with what he's meaning by the cave and going back and or not going back, but finding more knowledge in the dark, as he said previously. This unequal division symbolizes the lower degree of reality and truth found in the visible world as compared with the greater reality and truth in the intelligible world. So I think what he's saying there is the dark is basically the visible world, and then the light, I guess you could say, is the intelligible world. Each of these parts is then subdivided in the same proportion as the whole line, producing 4 parts, each one representing a clearer and more certain type of thought than the one below, one representing a clearer and more certain type of thought than the one below. I think I've read that more than once. Each of these parts is then subdivided in the same proportion as the whole line, producing 4 parts, each one representing a clearer and more certain type of thought than the one below. Recalling the allegory of the cave, we can think of this line as beginning in the dark and shadowy world at X and moving up to the bright light at Y. Going from X to Y represents a continuous process to our intellectual enlightenment. The objects presented to us at each level are not 4 different kinds of real objects. Rather, they represent 4 different ways of looking at the same object. Now, that's cool. I like that a lot. That's something I've noticed with my brain, especially when I make art or anything. It's like, would they say this part right here, the objects presented to us at each level are not 4 different kinds of real objects. Rather, they represent 4 different ways of looking at the same object. It's like if I'm painting, and most of the times it's very abstractual, and I'm just like making markings, and then it turns into some image I'm seeing in my brain, and then that kind of takes off from there. I look at things, and just daily occurrences will happen where like I need this to do that, and I'll find something that's not meant to do that, but I'll do it with that, and it works. One of my favorite things. Damn, I don't know where it is, but when I was a diesel mechanic, a tumbler is basically like what you put your key in the, like a tumbler would be this, you put your key in the ignition, the key goes into the tumbler. Well, we had to take these tumblers out because we were changing the keys because we got new trucks and then whatever. So I came to work one day, and in the morning the AM guy had to take a tumbler out, but he couldn't get it out, and so he had a bolt that he basically just bolted into the tumbler and then ripped it out, I guess. I don't know what happened when he did it, but it was a bolt in a tumbler, and I just love that because it just represented to me, it's like, yeah, no key was needed. Like, we got that shit out. Like, it's there's one job, it can be done this many ways, though. And I think that's a very important thing to know, and it's a very valuable skill to have, to be able to look at one thing and see not just one thing. There's a thing in I don't know the name of the movie, One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest or whatever it is, I think, with Jack Nicholson, where this guy's always saying, like, how many fingers am I holding up? How many fingers am I holding up? And motherfuckers have 4. Because, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? But he says, focus on me, and then if you focus on him, it turns into 8, because these turn into, you see double, because your nose is breaking the image into 2. So it's, and he says, you need to see what people don't see. You need to see the real world. And it's like, is that the real world? Like, are there 8 fingers or are there 4 fingers? My brain's not big enough for that. I think I got 4. Imagining. The most superficial form of mental activity is found at the lowest level of the line. Here we confront images. Or at least an amount of reality. The word imagining could, of course, mean the activity of penetrating beyond the mere appearances of things to their deeper reality. But here Plato means by imagining simply the sense experience of appearances, wherein we take these appearances as true reality. An obvious example is a shadow, which can be mistaken for something real. Actually, the shadow is something real. It is a real shadow. But what makes imagining the lowest form of knowing is that at this stage we do not know that it is a shadow or an image that it has confronted. If a person knew that it was a shadow, she would not be in the state of imagining or illusion. The prisoners in the cave were trapped in the deepest ignorance because they were unaware that they were seeing shadows. That was reality. They weren't seeing shadows. Besides shadows, there are other kinds of images that Plato considered deceptive. These are images fashioned by the artist and the poet. I had an episode just last that talked. Friedrich Nietzsche has a thing where he says poets exploit their experiences. That's interesting. Besides shadows, there are other things of images that Plato considered deceptive. These are the images fashioned by the artist and the poet. The artist presents images that are at least 2 steps removed from true reality. Suppose an artist paints a portrait of Socrates. Socrates represents a specific or concrete version of the ideal human. Moreover, the portrait represents only the artist's own view of Socrates. The 3 levels of reality here are, then, 1, the form of humanness. I don't know if that's right. I'm going to start over. The 3 levels of reality here are the form of humanness, 2, the embodiment of this form in Socrates, and 3, the image of Socrates is represented on canvas. Plato's criticism of art is that it produces images that in turn stimulate illusory ideas in the observer. I mean, yeah, it's a trickster, I guess you could say. But I mean, that's kind of that's the point of it. It's planting the seed to grow into whatever the receiver wants it to grow into. That's the beauty of it, I would say. I wonder if criticism means critique in a negative or positive. Again, it is when the image is taken as a perfect version of something real that illusion is produced. again, it is when the image is taken as a perfect version of something that illusion is produced. I understand that, I guess, then. Yeah, like, maybe, like, picture perfect or, like, picturesque, like, you know, because you're articulating the image to be what you want it to be. So it's not uh, a natural moment, you could say. It's just like, what's the word? Not, I guess scripted, yeah, scripted. What concerned Plato most were the images fashioned by the art of using words. Oh, that's interesting. Poetry and rhetoric were for him the most serious sources of illusion. Words have the power of creating images in our minds, and the poet and rhetoric. Interesting word. Words have the power of creating images in our minds, and the poet and rhetorician have great skill in using words to create such images. Plato was particularly critical of the sophists, whose influence came from this very skill in the use of words. They could make either side of an argument seem as good as the other. That's a very important trait to have. They could make either side of an argument seem as good as the other. When I was learning about writing essays when I was in school, I just remember one of the biggest principles of writing an essay was being able to identify your holes in your argument. And I just remember that when I started doing that, I was able. It's because it's like when you find a fault in your thinking, then you have to defend your thinking, and then your thinking grows, and then your defense grows, and the thought of or idea you have grows as well, and it's more bolstered, you know. So it's a very important trait to have, I think. You know, the next stage is belief. If you're still interested. The next stage after imagining is belief. It may strike us as strange that Plato should use the word believing instead of knowing to describe the state of mind induced by seeing actual objects. We tend to feel a strong sense of certainty when we observe visible and tangible things. Still, for Plato, seeing constitutes only believing because visible objects depend on their context for many of their characteristics. Visible objects depend on their context for many of their characteristics. There's a degree of certainty that seeing gives us, but that is not absolute certainty. If the water of the Mediterranean looks blue from the shore but turns out to be clear when taken from the sea, our certainty about its color or composition is at least open to question. It may seem a certainty that all bodies have weight because we see them fall, but this testimony of our vision must also be adjusted to the fact of the weightlessness of bodies in space at certain altitudes. Plato therefore says that believing, even if it is based on seeing, is still in the stage of opinion. The state of mind produced by visible objects is clearly on a level higher than imagining because it is based upon a higher form of reality. But although actual things possess greater reality than do their shadows, they do not by themselves give us all the knowledge that we want to have about them. Whether it be color, weight, or some other quality, we experience these properties of things under particular circumstances. For this reason, our knowledge about them is limited to these particular circumstances, but we are unsatisfied with this kind of knowledge, knowing that its certainty could very well be shaken if the circumstances were altered. True scientists, therefore, do not continue their understanding to these particular cases, but instead look for I'm going to redo it. True scientists, therefore, do not confine their understanding to these particular cases, but instead look for principles behind the behavior of things. I like that. That's a good thing to do as well. That one and this one. They could make either side of an argument seem as good as the other. And true scientist doesn't have to be scientist, person. Do not confine their understanding to these particular cases, but instead look for principles behind the behavior of things. Right? Get to the root, not the symptom. We're in a society of symptom treatment, not root pulling, right? At least that's my perspective of it. It seems like we're just slapping band-aids on shit and say, come back in 6 months, if they can, you know? Thinking. I do a lot of that. When we move from believing to thinking, we move from the visible world to the intelligible world, and from the realm of opinion to the realm of knowledge. The state of mind that Plato calls thinking is particularly characteristic of the scientist. Scientists deal with visible things, but not simply with their vision of them. For the scientist, visible things are symbols of a reality that can be thought but not seen. Plato illustrates this kind of mental activity in reference to the mathematician. Mathematicians engage in the act of abstraction, of drawing out from the visible thing what that thing symbolizes. When mathematicians see the diagram of a triangle, they think about triangularity, or triangle in itself. They distinguish between the visible and the intelligible triangle. By using visible symbols, science produces a bridge from the visible to the intelligible world. Scientists force us to think. Because scientists are always searching for laws or principles, although scientists may look at a particular object, triangle or brain, they go beyond this particular triangle or brain, and think about the triangle or the brain. Science requires that we let go of our senses and rely instead on our intellects. Our minds know that 2 plus 2 equal 4 no matter 2 of what. Our minds also know that the angles of an equilateral triangle are all equal, regardless of the size of the triangle. Thinking, therefore, represents the ability of our minds to abstract from a visible object that property which is the same in all objects in the class, even though each actual subject will have other variable properties. We can, in short, think the form, humanness, whether we observe small, large, dark, light, young, or old persons. Same, but different. It's all the same. It's all the same. I'm you, you're me, we're them, they're us. It's us, we're it. Perfect intelligence. That's exciting. Perfect intelligence for 300. I like it. I'll do this last paragraph. It's been like an hour of me just reading about Plato. I just love this shit though. And it's like I wish I should have went to school for philosophy. I think I would have been like so my brain would have just been popping off. Like I would have loved it. Ugh. But, you can still study and pursue it on your own. So it's not a big deal. And you can probably learn more as well. Vanderbilt University textbook at the thrift store. Or tuition at a university. I don't know. You pick. So, perfect intelligence. We are never satisfied as long as we must still ask for a fuller explanation of things. But to have perfect knowledge would require that we grasp the relation of everything to everything else, that we see the unity of the whole of reality. With perfect intelligence, we are completely released from the realm of sensible objects. At this level, we deal directly with the forms. The forms are those intelligible. The forms are those intelligible objects, such as triangle and human, that have been abstracted from the actual objects. We grasp these pure forms without any interference from even the symbolic character of visible objects. Here, also, we no longer use hypotheses, which represent only limited and isolated truths. We approach this highest level of knowledge to the extent that we are able to move beyond the restrictions of hypotheses toward the unity of all forms. It is through our intellectual capacity of dialectic that we move toward its highest goal, which involves the ability to see at once the relation of all divisions of knowledge to each other. Perfect intelligence, therefore, means the unified view of reality, and for Plato, this implies the unity of knowledge. Plato concludes his discussion of the divided line with the summary statement. Now, you may take as corresponding to the 4 sections these 4 states of mind: intelligence for the highest, thinking for the second, belief for the third, and for the last, imagining. These you may arrange as the terms in a proportion, assigning to each a degree of clearness and certainty, corresponding to the measure in which their objects possess truth and reality. The highest degree of reality, he argued, consists of the forms. As compared with shadows, reflections, and even the visible objects, just what he meant by the forms we must now explore in greater detail. Now, I'm going to just read one last one. What are the forms, right? Just to finish this, because I don't want to do another episode cliffhanger, right? Y'all going to just be like, what happens at the end? So, what are the forms? Theory of the forms. Plato's theory of the forms is his most significant philosophical contribution. In a nutshell, the forms of those... damn, I was excited. Plato's theory of the forms is his most significant philosophical contribution. In a nutshell, the forms are the forms are those changeless, eternal, and non-material essences, or patterns of which the actual visible objects we see are only poor copies. There is the form of the triangle, and all the triangles we see are mere copies of that form. There are at least 5 questions that we might ask about the forms. There are at least 5 questions that we might ask about the forms, and although they cannot be answered with precision, of course, never can be, the replies to them that are found in his various dialogues will provide us with Plato's general theory of the forms. Now this is new to me. What are the forms? We have already suggested Plato's answer to this question by saying that forms are eternal patterns of which the objects we see are only copies. A beautiful person is a copy of beauty. Interesting. We can say about a person that she is beautiful because we know the form of beauty and recognize that this person shares more or less in this form. In his Symposium, Plato states that we normally grasp beauty first of all in a particular object or person, but having discovered beauty in this limited form, we soon perceive that the beauty of one form is akin to another, and so we move from the beauty of the particular body to the recognition that... I'm going to start over. We soon perceive that the beauty of one form is akin to another, and so we move from the beauty of a particular body to the recognition that beauty in every form is one and the same. The effect of this discovery that all types of beauty have some similarity is to loosen our attachment to the beautiful object and to move from the beautiful physical object to the concept of beauty. When a person discovers this general quality of beauty, Plato says, he will decrease his violent love of the one which he will consider a small thing and will become a lover of all beautiful forms. In the next stage, he will consider that the beauty of the mind is more honorable than the beauty of outward form. Then, drawing towards and contemplating the vast sea of beauty, he will create many fair and noble thoughts and notions and boundless love of wisdom, until on that shore he grows strong, and at last the vision is revealed to him of a single science, which is the science of beauty. Everywhere, that is, beautiful things in their multiplicity point toward a beauty from which everything else derives its beauty. But this beauty is not merely a concept. Beauty has objective reality. Beauty is a form. Things become beautiful, but beauty always is. Accordingly, beauty has a separate existence from those changing things that move in and out of beauty. In the Republic, Plato shows that the true philosopher wants to know the essential nature of things. When he asks what is justice or beauty, he does not want examples of just and beautiful things. He wants to know what makes these things just and beautiful. The difference between opinion and knowledge is simply this, that those who are at the level of opinion can recognize a just act, but cannot tell you why it is just. They do not know the essence of justice. 2025. I would say fucking 20 whatever the fuck today. They do not know the essence of justice, which the particular act shares. Knowledge does not involve simply the passing facts and appearances that is the realm of becoming. Knowledge seeks what truly is. Knowledge seeks what truly is. Its concern is with being. What really is, what has being, is the essential nature of things. These essences are eternal forms, such as beauty and goodness, which make it possible for us to judge things as beautiful or good. There are many other forms besides those of beauty and goodness. At one point, Plato speaks of the form of bed, of which the beds we see are mere copies, but this raises the question of whether there are as many forms as there are essences of or essential natures. Although Plato is not sure that there are forms of dog, water, and other things, he shows in the Parmenides, Parmenides. All right. Although Plato is not sure that there are forms of dog, water, and other things, he shows in the Parmenides that there are certainly not forms of mud and dirt. Clearly, if there are forms beyond all classifications of things, there would have to be a duplicate world. If there were forms behind all classifications of things, there would have to be a duplicate world. These difficulties increase as we try to specify how many and which forms there are. Nevertheless, what Plato means by the forms is clear enough, for he considers them to be the essential archetypes of things, having an eternal existence, grasped by our minds and not our senses. This is the cover, by the way. It ripped off, so I made it a composition book. I gotta find that part one more time. Nevertheless, what Plato means by the forms is clear enough, for he considers them to be the essential archetypes of things, having an eternal existence, grasped by our minds and not our senses. I think I can understand that. Passion, things like intangible emotions, feelings, thoughts, dreams, pursuits. Like, that's what I'm all about, the subconscious. I guess that would be considered the dark, though. I know, I think Freud, not saying anything about him necessarily, but just, I think he did a lot of work with the subconscious, and I think it's very important too. However, I think it's very easy to get lost in that territory. Subconscious is like Inception, when they go to fucking, what do they call it? They call it limbo or some shit, but like you're just stuck there for ages and ages, and I just feel like you can go mad. Like Jordan Peterson said, if you look too long into the abyss, maybe he's quoting someone. I don't know if Jordan Peterson said that. He might have. But if you stare too long into the abyss might stare back. I kind of want the fucker to stare back at me, though. I heard this quote one time where it said, if you and the devil never came face to face, it means y'all walk in the same way. I love it, What's the best way to face your demons? Turn around, Fucking face them. They're not shit. You are beyond strong. Like that movie Split, what I spoke about earlier, like in some other episodes, was like being able to like see this and being able to understand this from this. That movie Split, I think it was I could be wrong. Joseph Love Hewitt or whatever I think his name is. Um, he had split personality disorder, and when he would go into a different personality, his biology would act accordingly. And I just, and you can think about the placebo effect, where it's 50% as effective as the real thing, supposedly. But I strongly believe the belief you have overrides a lot of the physical that occurs, like a tremendous amount. Tremendous amount. But a lot of people need the physical feedback because it's honestly like you don't go crazy, but you are crazy because you're not getting physical feedback. So the feedback you're getting is from your fucking head. That's why people say you're crazy till it works, You're delusional till it's not. So it's just like, it's hard, and I understand it's hard to try to do that, but it's so worth it. Like I said, the richest place is the graveyard. And that's not me saying. I think Les Brown might have been saying that. It might be older than that, but I'm trying to live this life. Max out. Put this bitch to E. No gas left in the tank. Fuck that. Fuck that. I want to explore my capacity of understanding and ability to appreciate the current moment as much as I can. I want to practice that for as long as I can. That's really my main priority at the moment. I wonder what you guys think about Plato and all the things I said. I think hearing your responses, if you have any, would be interesting. That's kind of what I would like to start doing. I used to always think I wanted to open up a gym, like in my earlier years and things like that. And I think a gym would be nice, but like I feel like a gym would be more so at a time when I'm more financially stable, to where that's not my only source of income and things like that. Like it's not my only business or whatever. But being able to have a place where open-minded intellectuals can congregate. I always think about this movie Midnight in Paris with Owen Wilson, where he like travels back in time, and I forget this name of the cafe, but there's this cafe where, like, I think it was during the Renaissance, pardon me if I'm wrong, but it's like all of these painters that we talk about during this period of history would go, and I believe poets as well, authors, like anyone in a artistic pursuit would go and congregate and talk. And we have such a lack of that, yet we have such a strong connection, a strong ability to connect. I'll put it that way, because I don't think we have a strong connection. We have a strong ability to connect, but we don't take advantage of it, I don't believe, as much as we should. Because people really aren't, it seems like, there for, the cause. I played football in high school. It wasn't something that I was really super passionate about, but I learned a lot about myself and what I was capable of and what I could become, I guess you could say. But you go out in that field, you got 11 guys on your team. I played defense, so this doesn't really relate to me in so much, but there's only one quarterback. There's 11 people, there's one quarterback. And I just think people are not willing to be the wide receiver, the tight end, the running back. They want the light on them. And it's like, if the light would be on you, if you were able to help share it on someone else, like I just don't get the logic with it. Like we're kicking people down and trying to like say I'm so different than you, and I got all like that's some sort of accomplishment to be so different. It seems, this might be a little too much, but it seems like people want to separate themselves from their humanistic qualities as much as they can because they see it in other people and they are not appealing of it, or it's not appealing to them, I guess. I love human beings, like the core of human beings, who they are, outside of the fucking And loving doesn't mean them being nice, like, thousands of years ago it's barbarian type shit. I don't know. It's just like we are an we are an incredible creature that has unlimited potential. And that is the most exciting, fascinating thing ever to be occurring, you know? It's so exciting to me to learn about shit. I'm sorry, shit. Like, to learn about things, to learn about the world, to learn about people who've done things, who made a difference, who said this when it needed to be said. Like, it's important to know. We're not here just to live and experience the present. I think we're supposed to understand the past in order to act accordingly in the present so that the future can be somewhat supportive of a brighter future than it has been in the past. Everything's going to be okay.